The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal gardens of Nuchtu, as 8-year-old Minho chased his little sister through the rows of gleaming plants. The crystals grew like flowers from the rich soil, their surfaces catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the ground. Yuna giggled as she ran, her small legs carrying her between the crystal stalks while her brother followed close behind. "Catch me if you can," Yuna called over her shoulder, her voice echoing through the garden. Minho laughed and picked up speed. At 8 years old, he was already showing the careful nature that would serve him well when he took over the family farm someday. But right now, he was just a boy playing with his sister in the early morning light. Their father Jihoon watched from the edge of the garden, a smile on his weathered face. He had been working the hydroponic farm since before dawn, but he always made time to see his children play. Beside him, his wife Sumin checked the moisture levels in the soil with a small device. "The crystals are growing well this season," Sumin said, brushing dirt from her hands. "We should have a good harvest for the festival." Jihoon nodded. The harvest festival was only 3 weeks away, and the whole colony looked forward to it every year. It was a time when all 50,000 residents of New Busan came together to celebrate another successful growing season. Children especially loved it. Games and sweet treats and stories told under the stars. New Busan had been home to humans for 3 generations now. The first settlers had arrived when Jihoon's grandfather was just a young man, drawn by the promise of fertile soil and peaceful skies. The planet sat on the edge of known space, far from the busy trade routes and political troubles of the inner worlds. Here, families could build quiet lives and raise their children in safety. The crystal farms were the heart of the colony's success. The strange plants grew nowhere else in the galaxy, and their harvested crystals were prized throughout human space for their ability to store and focus energy. A single crystal could power a small ship for months, and the finest ones were used in the most advanced human technology, but the colonists of New Busan cared little for such things. They were farmers and teachers, engineers and artists. They had come to the edge of space not to seek fortune, but to find peace. Minho finally caught up to his sister near the center of the garden, where the oldest crystal tree stood, ancient. Plant rose 15 meters into the air, its trunk thick with age, and its branches heavy with perfect crystals. According to the colony's records, it had been growing here long before the first human ever set foot on the planet. "I win," Yuna declared, throwing her arms around the crystal tree's smooth trunk. "You had a head start," Minho protested, but he was smiling. He loved his little sister more than anything in the world. Was 5 years old and full of energy, always ready for adventure or mischief. The 2 children sat in the shade of the great tree, catching their breath and watching the morning light play through the crystal branches above them. In the distance, they could see the white buildings of the colony's main settlement, where most of the 50,000 residents lived and worked. "Papa says the festival will be the best one yet," Yuna said, picking up a small crystal that had fallen from the tree. "There will be music and dancing and all the good food." Minho nodded. He was old enough to help with the festival preparations, and he had been working with the other children to plan special games and activities. The festival was held every year in the colony's main square, but this year they would also use the big field next to the primary school. The primary school was the pride of New Busan. It had been built just 5 years ago, when the colony's population had grown large enough to need a dedicated building for education. Before that, children had learned in small groups in people's homes. Now, over 200 children attended classes in the bright, cheerful building with its large windows and modern equipment. Yuna would start school there next year, and she was already excited about it. She had visited many times with Minho. She loved the big library with its thousands of books and the science lab where older children learned about the crystal plants and other wonders of their world. "Will you show me the new classroom when we go to school today?" Yuna asked. Minho was supposed to help his teacher prepare decorations for the festival. His parents had said Yuna could come along. "Of course," he said. "Teacher Bora has been working on something special for the festival. She says it will be a surprise." The morning grew warmer as the sun climbed higher. In the distance, Jihoon called to his children that it was time for breakfast. They ran back through the crystal garden, their feet crunching on the path between the gleaming plants. The family ate together in their small kitchen, as they did every morning. Ji-hoon and Soo-min talked about the day's work while Min-ho and Yoona planned their games. It was a simple meal of bread and fruit and milk from the colony's dairy cows, but it was perfect for a family that had everything they needed. After breakfast, Ji-hoon and Soo-min headed to the main fields where the largest crystal farms spread across the valley. Min-ho and Yoona walked to the school, taking the path that led through the heart of the colony. New Busan was a beautiful place. The buildings were made of white stone quarried from the nearby mountains, and every street was lined with trees that had been brought from Earth generations ago. Gardens bloomed everywhere, tended by families who took pride in making their world as lovely as possible. The children passed the market, square where vendors were setting up their stalls for the day. They waved to Mr. Sung-jin, who sold fresh bread, and Mrs. Jung-yi, who grew the finest vegetables in the colony. Everyone knew everyone in New Busan, and the children felt safe and loved wherever they went. At the school, Teacher Bora greeted them with a warm smile. She was a young woman who had come to New Busan just 2 years ago, fresh from teacher training on one of the inner worlds. She had fallen in love with the peaceful life on the colony world, and the children adored her. "Good morning, Min-ho," she said. "And hello, little Yoona. Are you ready to see what we have been working on?" The children followed her into the school's main hall, where other students were already busy with festival preparations. The hall was decorated with paper flowers and strings of lights, and there was a sweet smell of baking coming from the kitchen where some of the older students were making treats for the celebration. Everything was perfect. The children were happy and safe, surrounded by family and friends in a world that had known only peace. They had no idea that far above them, alien ships were already entering their star system, bringing with them a darkness that would change everything forever. Harvest Festival was still 3 weeks away, but for the people of New Busan, time was running out. The alien ships arrived without warning on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before the Harvest Festival. Colony Administrator Dong-yoon was having his morning coffee when the alert sirens began to wail across New Busan. He rushed to the communication center, where operators were frantically trying to make sense of the readings on their screens. "Sir, we have 12 large ships in orbit," reported Communications Officer Minji, her voice tight with worry. They appeared suddenly, no advance warning at all. Dong-yoon had never seen anything like it. The ships were massive, each one longer than 3 city blocks and covered in strange metal that seemed to shift color in the light. They hung in the sky like dark clouds, blocking out portions of the sun and casting shadows across the colony below. Within an hour, the aliens made contact. Their message was brief and cold, delivered in perfect human language by a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "Humans of New Busan," the voice said. "I am Thane Commander Vex of the Velkari Empire. This world contains materials essential to our civilization. You have 72 hours to evacuate all human presence from this planet. Failure to comply will result in your removal by force." The message ended without any opportunity for reply. Dong-yoon immediately called an emergency meeting of the Colony Council. The 12 elected leaders gathered in the town hall, their faces grave with concern. "We cannot simply abandon our home," said Councillor Hoon-woo, whose family had lived on New Busan for 3 generations. "This colony represents the life's work of 50,000 people. But what choice do we have?" asked Councillor Isil. "Those ships could destroy us all without effort." Dong-yoon stood at the head of the table, looking out the window at the alien vessels that hung like a threat over their world. "We'll try to negotiate," he decided. "Perhaps we can reach some kind of agreement. This is our home, and we will not give it up without a fight." The next 2 days passed in tense negotiations. The Velkari were a confederation of 4 different alien species, all of them convinced of their superiority over humans. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved or destroyed countless civilizations. To them, humans were just another primitive species to be brushed aside. Commander Vex grew increasingly impatient with human attempts at diplomacy. The Velkari had expected immediate submission, not stubborn resistance from what they considered a weak farming colony. They had studied human settlements for months, observing only peaceful traders and explorers. They believed humans were soft and would break easily under pressure. "These creatures test our patience," Vex told his officers on the third day. "They refuse to accept the natural order. We must show them the price of defiance," the Valkyrie decided. To make an example that would break human will to resist, they had studied the colony's layout and identified its most vulnerable points. The school where the humans gathered their young seemed like the perfect target. A surgical strike there would terrorize the population without significant military risk. They chose the day of the pre-festival celebration, when all the colony's children would be gathered in one place. Minho woke up that morning excited about the special day at school. Teacher Bora had planned games and activities to prepare for the harvest festival. Parents were invited to join the celebration. The school's main hall was decorated with paper flowers and colorful banners, and the smell of fresh bread filled. "The air today will be wonderful," Una said as she put on her best dress. She was especially excited because she would get to spend the whole day at the school, playing with the older children and seeing what her classes would be like next year. Gi-hoon and Sumin had taken the day off from the Crystal Farms to attend the celebration. Like most parents in the colony, they treasured these moments with their children. The shadow of the alien ship still hung over New Busan, but life had to continue, and the children deserved their joy. The celebration began at 10 in the morning. 200 children filled the school's main hall, their voices bright with laughter and excitement. Parents stood along the walls, watching their sons and daughters perform songs and dances they had practiced for weeks. Minho stood on the small stage with his classmates, singing a song about the Crystal Gardens. In the audience he could see his parents, smiling proudly. Una sat in the front row with the other younger children, clapping her hands to the rhythm of the music. The attack came without warning at exactly 11-30. The first Valkyrie beam struck the school's roof, through the metal and concrete like it was paper. The second beam hit the main support beam, and the third shattered the large windows that faced the playground. The beautiful hall filled with dust and smoke and the screams of terrified children. "Everyone down," Teacher Bora shouted, but the voice was lost in the noise of collapsing walls and crying children. Minho saw the ceiling falling toward his little sister. Without thinking, he jumped from the stage and threw himself over Una, covering her small body with his own. The heavy beam that would have crushed her struck him instead, pinning both children under the rubble. Around them, the chaos continued. Parents rushed forward to find their children, but more beams from the alien ships kept striking the building. The Valkyrie were systematic in their attack, targeting every part of the structure to ensure maximum damage. In the communication center across town, Dong-Yoon watched the horror unfold on his screens. The aliens were deliberately targeting the school, making sure that every human on the planet would see what happened to those who defied the Valkyrie Empire. "Get me a connection to Earth," he ordered, his voice shaking with rage and grief. "Send out the emergency beacon to every human ship, every human world. Tell them what has happened here." The attack lasted only 5 minutes, but it changed everything. When the dust finally settled, 37 children lay dead in the ruins of their school. Minho was among them, his small body twisted from the impact of the falling beam. Una survived, but both her legs were crushed beyond repair. The Valkyrie ships hung silently in orbit, their message delivered with brutal clarity. They had shown the humans the price of resistance, and now they expected immediate surrender. They had made a terrible mistake. Within hours, the emergency beacon from New Busan reached every corner of human space. The images of the destroyed school and the broken bodies of children spread from world to world, carried by news networks and personal messages. Humanity saw what the Valkyrie had done to their youngest and most innocent in the Senate chambers. On Earth, Chairman Kung Su stood before the assembled representatives of all human worlds. His face was carved from stone, his voice cold as winter space. "Oh, the Valkyrie have chosen to make war on our children," he said. "They will learn what it means to face humanity's wrath." For the first time in 200 years, the human Senate voted for total war. Every human world, every human ship, every human citizen was now committed to a single purpose: the complete destruction of the Velkari Empire. The aliens had wanted to terrorize humanity into submission by killing children. Instead, they had awakened something that had slept since the early days of human expansion. They had reminded humanity why they had once been the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Velkari would soon learn that there were fates worse than death, and that harming a human child was the fastest way to discover them. The news of the new Busan attack spread through human space like wildfire. On Earth, Admiral Tyone stood in the war room deep beneath the Human Defense Headquarters, watching reports flood in from every human world. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "Sir, we have confirmation from all sectors," reported his aide, Lieutenant Su Yang. "Every human fleet commander has acknowledged the total war declaration. They are requesting immediate orders." Admiral Taeon had served in the Human Defense Fleet for 40 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Messages were coming in from human colonies, trading posts, and exploration ships throughout the galaxy. Civilians were volunteering for military service. Tired officers were reporting for duty. Even the peaceful research stations were asking how they could help. "Activate Protocol 7, the Admiral ordered quietly. Lieutenant Su Yang's eyes widened. Protocol 7 had been classified for decades, known only to the highest levels of human military command. She had heard whispers about it during her officer training, but she had never believed the stories were true. "Sir, are you certain?" she asked. "The Velkari killed our children," Admiral Taehan replied. "They will face the consequences." Across human space, seemingly innocent exploration ships began to change. The civilian vessels that had been mapping new star systems and establishing trade routes suddenly revealed their true nature. Hidden weapon systems emerged from their hulls. Armor plating slid over their windows. Military personnel who had been disguised as scientists and traders took their real positions. Captain Jinwoo commanded one of these ships, a vessel called the Peaceful Dawn that had spent the last 5 years exploring the Outer Rim. For 5 years he had maintained the pretense of being a simple survey ship. Now, as Protocol 7 activated, his ship transformed into a fully armed warship. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "Our real mission begins now. We are no longer explorers. We are hunters." The crew of the Peaceful Dawn had been waiting for this moment. They were all volunteers, men and women who had given up normal lives to serve in humanity's secret fleet. They had watched and waited, mapping alien territories and identifying military targets, all while pretending to be harmless civilians. On the bridge, navigation officer Chae Young pulled up star charts that showed the location of every Velkari military base, supply depot, and population center. The information had been gathered over years of careful observation, compiled by dozens of ships like theirs. "The Velkari have 42 star systems under their control," she reported. "We have complete intelligence on 38 of them. Enemy fleet strength is estimated at 800 vessels of various classes." Captain Jinwoo studied the data with cold satisfaction. The Velkari thought they were dealing with a simple farming colony and a few peaceful trading ships. They had no idea that humanity had been preparing for war for decades, just waiting for someone to give them a reason. On Earth, the hidden shipyards that had been disguised as asteroid mining operations began to reveal their true purpose. Engineer Junho had spent 15 years managing what everyone believed was a simple mining facility in the asteroid belt. In reality, he had been overseeing the construction of humanity's secret battle fleet. "Begin launch sequence for all vessels," he ordered his team. "It is time to show the galaxy what we have been building." The asteroid split open like flowers, revealing massive warships that had been constructed in secret over the past 20 years. These were not the small, fast ships that humans used for exploration and trade. These were instruments of war, built with one purpose: to destroy any enemy that threatened human children. Dr. Sulji, xenobiologist who had been studying on New Busan, had escaped the attack and was now on Earth. She worked day and night in the research laboratories, analyzing every scrap of data about Velkari biology and technology. Her studies of the alien species had taken on a new urgency. "Have 4 different species in their empire," she explained to the military planners. Each one has different strengths and weaknesses. If we can exploit those weaknesses, we can turn their diversity against them. Meanwhile, physicist Nayan led a team of scientists who had been developing new weapons in secret. The technologies they had created were based on human studies of the crystal plants from New Busan and similar discoveries on other worlds. They had been working on these projects for years, never knowing when they might be needed. The new plasma cannons are ready for field testing, she reported. They generate 3 times the power of anything the Valkyrie have ever encountered. Strategist Min Seok studied the intelligence reports from the hidden fleet and began planning. Humanity's response? He was a quiet man who had spent his entire career thinking about how to fight wars that might never come. Now his theories would be put to the test. The Valkyrie expect us to surrender or to fight a defensive battle, he told the War Council. They have no understanding of human nature. They think we are soft because we prefer peace. They will learn otherwise. The transformation of humanity was happening everywhere. On the mining world of New Seoul, factory workers began producing ammunition instead of tools. On the agricultural world of New Incheon, farmers organized themselves into supply units too. Feed the growing military. On the research station of Deep Space 7, scientists worked around the clock to develop new technologies for the war effort. General Hunjin, who had been in charge of planetary defense, found himself commanding forces he had never known existed. Ships appeared from hidden bases throughout human space, each one crewed by personnel who had been living double lives for years. How many ships do we have? He asked Admiral Taeyoon. More than enough, the admiral replied. The Velkar have 800 vessels. We have been building for 20 years. They will be outnumbered 5-1. But numbers were not the only advantage humanity possessed. The Valkyrie had grown comfortable in their dominance over other species. They had conquered worlds by overwhelming weaker civilizations with superior technology and ruthless tactics. They had never faced an enemy that could match their strength and exceed their ruthlessness. High Admiral Keth of the Valkyrie Empire was confident in his superiority. His species had ruled the galaxy for centuries. They had never encountered serious resistance from any other civilization. The humans seemed no different from the dozens of other species they had conquered. These creatures will surrender. Within days, he told his officers, destruction of their young has surely broken their will to fight. Commander Vex, who had ordered the attack on the school, agreed with his superior. They are farmers and traders, he said. They have no stomach for real war. Once they see our true strength, they will beg for mercy. The Valkyrie had no idea that humanity's peaceful nature was not weakness, but choice. They had never studied human history, never learned about the wars that had raged across Earth for thousands of years before humanity had learned to live in peace. They did not understand that humans had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply chosen not to. The first human warships began appearing at the edge of Valkyrie space. Just 1 week after the attack on New Busan, these were not the exploration vessels the aliens had grown accustomed to seeing. These were predators, sleek and deadly, built for one purpose. Fleet Admiral Songho stood on the bridge of the battleship Vengeance, watching the Valkyrie border system grow larger on his screens. Behind him, a fleet of 200 human warships waited for his orders. Each ship carried weapons that had never been tested in combat, crewed by personnel who had trained for years for this moment. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Sungho, he announced. Today we begin the lesson the Valkyrie will never forget. They chose to make war on our children. Now they will learn what it means to face humanity's wrath. The war for New Busan was about to begin, but it would not be the war the Valkyrie expected. They had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for centuries, something that would not rest until every threat to human children had been eliminated forever. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had once been feared throughout the stars, and why harming a human child was the most dangerous mistake any species could make. The first battle of the war began at dawn over the Valkyrie border world of Keth Prime. Fleet Admiral Songho watched from the bridge of his flagship as 200 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Before them lay the Valkyrie fleet, 500 vessels strong. arranged in the traditional battle formation that had served them well for centuries. High Admiral Keth stood on his command ship, confident in his overwhelming numerical advantage. His fleet had never known defeat, and these humans seemed no different from the dozens of other species they had crushed over the years. "All ships advance," Admiral Keth ordered. "We will destroy them quickly and move on to their homeworld." But the humans did not advance to meet them. Instead, they split into smaller groups and began moving toward the planet below. This confused the Velkhari commanders who had expected a direct assault on their fleet. "They are ignoring us," reported Commander Vex, who had been given command. Of the left wing, they seemed to be targeting the planet itself. Admiral Keth frowned. This was not how civilized warfare was conducted. The proper way was for the two fleets to meet in open space, where the stronger force would prove its superiority. Attacking planetary targets while avoiding fleet combat was considered cowardly by Velkhari standards. "Captain," Ji Woo commanded the human strike force heading for the planet. Her ship, the Children's Shield, led 50 fast attack vessels toward the orbital platforms that protected Keth Prime. These platforms housed millions of Velkhari civilians and were considered untouchable by the rules of war that govern galactic conflicts. "Target the docking stations and power generators," Captain Ji Woo ordered. "We want the platforms disabled, not destroyed." The human ships opened fire with weapons the Velkhari had never seen before. Plasma beams cut through the orbital platforms like knives through paper, severing the connections that held them in stable orbit. Within minutes, 12 massive stations were falling toward the planet below, their millions of inhabitants trapped and helpless. "This is barbaric," Admiral Keth shouted. "They are targeting civilians." But the humans were following a different kind of warfare, one that the Velkhari had never encountered. They were not interested in honorable combat or civilized rules. They were fighting to eliminate a threat to their children, and they would use any means necessary to achieve that goal. The Velkhari fleet broke formation and rushed toward the planet to rescue their falling civilians. This was exactly what the humans had planned. As the alien ships scattered to catch the orbital platforms, exposed themselves to the rest of the human fleet. Fleet Admiral Sangho gave the order his ships had been waiting for. "All vessels, attack." The human warships fell upon the scattered Velkhari fleets like wolves among sheep. The aliens found themselves fighting dozens of separate battles instead of one coordinated engagement. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they were divided and confused. The battle raged for 6 hours. Humans fought with a cold efficiency that terrified the Velkhari. They showed no mercy to enemy ships, but they also made sure that the falling orbital platforms landed safely on the planet's surface. It was a demonstration of humanity's dual nature, utterly ruthless toward their enemies, but protective of innocent life. When the smoke cleared, 300 Velkhari ships had been destroyed or disabled. The humans had lost only 12 vessels. It was the worst defeat in Velkhari history. It was only the beginning. Commander Hyesu, who had taken over from Admiral Keth after his flagship was destroyed, sent a message to the surviving Velkhari forces throughout the galaxy. Her words were broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every alien in the Empire would hear them. "You killed our children," she said, her voice as cold as the space between stars. "You thought we were weak because we chose peace, you thought. We would surrender because we valued life. You were wrong. We're not weak. We are not peaceful. We are humanity, and we are coming for you." The news of the defeat at Keth Prime spread through the Velkhari Empire like a disease. For the first time in centuries, their fleets had been beaten in open combat. Worse, the humans had shown a kind of warfare that the Velkhari did not understand. They fought without honor, without mercy, and without any respect for the traditional rules of engagement, intelligence. Officer Subin had been monitoring Velkhar communications since the war began. Her teams had broken their codes years ago. During the long period of secret observation, now she listened to the panic spreading through their empire. "They are calling emergency meetings on every world," she reported. "Their military commanders are demanding reinforcements. Their civilian leaders are asking for peace negotiations. But humanity was not interested in peace. The images of dead, Children on Nubasan had awakened something primal in the human spirit, something that would not be satisfied until the threat was completely eliminated. Admiral Taeyun stood before the assembled human fleet commanders, his face grim with purpose. Behind him, a star map showed the location of every Valkyrie military base, supply depot, and population center. Years of secret intelligence gathering had given humanity a complete picture of their enemy's empire. The Valkyrie believe they can negotiate with us, he said. They think this is a normal war, one that will end with treaties and territorial agreements. They are wrong. This war will end only when they are no longer capable of threatening human children. The human fleet began its advance into Valkyrie space. They moved like a tide of destruction, overwhelming every system they encountered. Valkyrie tried to mount a defense, but their fleets had been scattered by the disaster at Keth Prime. They could not concentrate their forces fast enough to stop the human advance. General Chanwu led the ground forces that followed the fleet. His soldiers were not interested in occupying Valkyrie worlds. Instead, they destroyed military installations, shipyards, and weapons factories. They were systematically dismantling the Valkyrie Empire's ability to make war. Leave the civilians alone, he ordered his troops, but destroy everything that could be used to build ships or weapons. The Valkyrie will never again have the power to threaten any child, human or otherwise. The war was not just being fought in space. Dr. Jungi led a team of scientists who were developing biological weapons specifically designed to target Valkyrie. Physiology. These weapons would not kill, but they would make it impossible for the Valkyrie to function as a military force. We are not monsters, Dr. Jungi explained to the military leaders. We will not commit genocide, but we will make sure that the Valkyrie can never again pose a threat to innocent life. Admiral Su Jin commanded the Psychological Warfare Division. Her teams broadcast messages throughout Valkyrie space, showing the images of the dead children from New Busan, but they also showed the human rescue efforts, the protection of Valkyrie civilians, and the careful restraint that human forces showed toward non-combatants. We want them to understand, she explained. We are not cruel by nature. We are not conquerors. But we will not allow anyone to harm our children. The message was clear. Humanity was not fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting to protect their young. They would continue fighting until that protection was guaranteed. Other alien civilizations watched the war with growing alarm. The Valkyrie Empire had been one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, and the humans were destroying it with terrifying efficiency. Species that had remained neutral began to reconsider their positions. The Zelthan Confederation, which had been considering an alliance with the Valkyrie, quickly withdrew their ambassadors. The Kryn Republic, which had been planning to expand into human territory, canceled their military buildup. Throughout the galaxy, Alayan civilizations began to understand that humanity was not the weak species they had appeared to be. Haun, Goi had been a peace activist before the war, now worked as a war correspondent. She documented the human advance through Valkyrie space, showing the galaxy how humanity conducted warfare. Her reports were broadcast throughout known space, ensuring that every civilization would understand the lesson. Humanity does not seek war, she reported from the ruins of a Valkyrie shipyard. But when war comes to them, when their children are threatened, they become something else entirely. They become a force of nature, unstoppable and terrible. The Valkyrie Empire was crumbling. Their fleets were scattered, their shipyards destroyed, their military commanders dead or captured. But the war was far from over. The humans had made it clear that they would not stop until the threat was completely eliminated. Emperor Zeth of the Valkyrie Empire watched from his palace as reports of defeat poured in from every corner of his domain. He had ruled for 50 years, expanding his empire through conquest and intimidation. Now, in the span of months, everything he had built was being torn down by a species he had considered beneath notice. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked his remaining advisors. "Less than 200, Your Majesty," came the reply. "The humans have destroyed or captured everything else." Emperor Zeth closed his eyes. He had made a terrible mistake when he had ordered the attack on the human school. He thought he was dealing with a weak farming colony. Instead, he had awakened a sleeping giant, one that would not rest until his empire was nothing but a memory. 6 months after the first battle at Keth Prime, the Valkyrie Empire was dying. Their military had been shattered, their shipyards destroyed, and their trade routes cut off by human forces. Emperor Zeth sat in his palace on the capital world of Velcros, watching his empire crumble around him. The humans had been methodical in their destruction. They did not simply defeat Velcray's fleets. They hunted down every ship, every base, every facility that could be used to build weapons. It was clear that they intended to make it impossible for the Velkhari to ever threaten anyone again. "Your Majesty," said his chief advisor, Minister Thek, "we have received another message from the human fleet.
Oh.
They are demanding our complete surrender." Emperor Zeth looked at the message with growing desperation. The human terms were simple: surrender unconditionally, or face total annihilation. There was no mention of negotiations, no offer of compromise. The humans wanted nothing less than the complete submission of the Velkhari Empire. "What do our military commanders recommend?" the Emperor asked. "They recommend surrender, Your Majesty," Minister Thek replied quietly. "We have fewer than 50 ships left in our entire fleet.
Oh.
The humans have over 3,000 vessels surrounding our remaining worlds." Emperor Zeth had spent his entire reign expanding his empire through conquest. The idea of surrender was foreign to him. But he was also intelligent enough to understand that continued resistance meant the extinction of his people. "Send a message to the human fleet," he ordered. "Tell them that Emperor Zeth of the Velkhari Empire wishes to discuss terms of surrender." A message was sent to Admiral Taeyun, who was commanding the human fleet from his flagship in orbit around Velcros. The admiral read the Emperor's words with cold satisfaction. He had been waiting for this moment since the day he had first seen the images of dead children on New Busan. "Prepare Ambassador Minja's ship," he ordered. "It is time to deliver humanity's answer." Ambassador Minjay had been a diplomat before the war, skilled in negotiation and compromise. But the attack on New Busan had changed her, just as it had changed all of humanity.
Oh.
She no longer believed in negotiation with child killers. Her ship landed on Velcros under heavy guard. The capital city was a monument to Valkyrie power. It's filled with tall spires and gleaming towers that had been built with the wealth stolen from conquered worlds. But now the city was dark, its people hiding in fear of the human fleet overhead. Emperor Zeth received the human ambassador in his throne room, a vast chamber decorated with the symbols of his empire's victories. He sat on a throne made from the bones of his enemies, wearing robes woven from the finest materials his empire could provide. "Welcome, Ambassador," he said, trying to maintain his dignity despite his desperate situation. "I am prepared to discuss reasonable terms for ending this conflict." Ambassador Minjay looked at the Emperor with eyes as cold as winter space. She had seen the recordings of the school attack, had watched the footage of children dying under Valkyrie weapons. She had no interest in being reasonable. "There will be no negotiation," she said. "There will be no compromise. You have two choices: complete surrender or total extinction." Emperor Zeth was stunned by the harshness of her words. Throughout his reign, he had been accustomed to fear and respect from other species. The idea that someone would speak to him with such contempt was almost incomprehensible. "Surely we can reach some accommodation," he said. "We are willing to pay reparations, to withdraw from human space, to sign treaties guaranteeing peace between our peoples." "You killed our children," Ambassador Minjay replied. "There is no accommodation for that. There is no treaty that can bring them back. There is only justice." She placed a datapad on the floor before the Emperor's throne. "These are humanity's terms. You have 24 hours to decide." The terms were brutal in their simplicity. The Velkhari Empire would be dissolved. All Velkhari military forces would be disbanded. The 4 species that made up the empire would be relocated to a single world under human supervision. They would spend the next 1,000 years learning to value life, especially the lives of children. Emperor Zeth read the terms with growing horror. This was not surrender. It was the end of everything his people had built over centuries of conquest. "This is impossible," he protested. "You are asking us to give up our entire civilization. Your civilization chose to make war on children, Ambassador Minjay replied. Now you will face the consequences of that choice. While the Emperor considered humanity's terms, the human fleet continued its work of destruction. General Chanwu led the forces that were systematically dismantling what remained of Velkhari military power. His soldiers moved through the empire, like a plague, destroying everything that could be used to build weapons or ships. Leave nothing intact, he ordered his troops. Every shipyard, every weapons factory, every military base must be reduced to rubble. The Velkhari will never again have the power to threaten innocent life. The work was thorough and methodical. Human engineers used advanced demolition techniques to ensure that the destroyed facilities could never be rebuilt. They were not just winning a war, they were rewriting the balance of power in the galaxy. Dr. Jungi's biological weapons had proven devastatingly effective. The viruses he had developed did not kill, but they made it impossible for the Velkhari to function as a military force. Affected aliens lost their ability to operate complex machinery, to coordinate attacks, to maintain discipline under pressure. We are not monsters, Dr. Jungi reminded his team. We are not seeking to destroy a species, we are seeking to ensure that this species can never again pose a threat to children. The psychological warfare campaign led by Admiral Sujin had been equally successful. The images of dead human children, broadcast throughout Velkhari space, had broken the will of many alien civilians. But the humans had also shown their restraint, their protection of non-combatants, their careful distinction between soldiers and civilians. We want them to understand, Admiral Sujin explained to her staff. We are not conquerors. We are not here to build an empire. We're here to protect our children, and we will do whatever is necessary to ensure that protection. The message was spreading throughout the galaxy. Other alien civilizations watched the systematic destruction of the Velkhari Empire with growing alarm. The humans were demonstrating a kind of warfare that was both terrifying and admirable. They were utterly ruthless toward their enemies. But they showed remarkable restraint toward innocent life. The Althari Collective, which had been considering an expansion into human space, immediately canceled their plans. The Nexus Federation, which had been building a military alliance against humanity, dissolved the treaty before it could be signed. Throughout the galaxy, alien civilizations began to understand that humanity was not the weak species they had appeared to be. Emperor Zeth spent the night walking through his empty palace, considering humanity's ultimatum. His empire was finished. That much was clear. The only question was whether his people would survive to see another generation. In the morning, he summoned his remaining advisors to the throne room. The few ministers who had not fled the capital gathered around him there, faces filled with fear and despair. We will surrender, he announced. Send a message to the human fleet. Tell them that the Velkhari Empire accepts their terms unconditionally. The message was received by Admiral Taeyun with grim satisfaction. The war was effectively over. Velkhari Empire had been crushed, its military destroyed, its ability to threaten anyone eliminated forever, but the Admiral knew that the real work was just beginning. Humanity had to decide what to do with the millions of Velkhari civilians who had been complicit in their empire's crimes. They had to establish a new order that would prevent future threats to human children. Prepare the occupation forces, he ordered. We have a civilization to rebuild. The Velkhari had learned the hard way that harming human children was the most dangerous mistake any species could make. But the lesson was not just for them. Every civilization in the galaxy had watched the destruction of the Velkhari Empire, and they had all received the same message: humanity would go to any lengths to protect their young. The war was over, but its effects would be felt for generations to come. The galaxy had been reminded that beneath humanity's peaceful exterior lay the heart of a warrior species, one that would not hesitate to destroy any threat to their children. The Velkhari Empire was finished, but the age of human dominance was just beginning. 1 year after the surrender of the Velkhari Empire, the galaxy had been transformed. The trial of the Velkhari leadership was being held on Earth, in the Great Hall of the Human Justice Center. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations had come to witness the proceedings. Understanding that this moment would define the new order of galactic civilization, Emperor Zeth stood in the defendant's dock, his one-sprout bearing now broken by months of captivity. Beside him were Commander Vex, who had ordered the attack on the school, and 12 other high-ranking Velkhari officials who had been responsible for the Empire's military actions. Judge Yemen presided over the court, his face carved from stone as he looked down at the defendants. He had been chosen for this role because of his reputation for fairness, but also because he had lost his own nephew in the attack on New Busan. The defendants stand accused of genocide against human children, Judge Yemen announced to the packed courtroom. They are charged with the deliberate targeting of non-combatants, the destruction of civilian infrastructure, and the violation of every principle of civilized warfare. Prosecutor Yunji rose to present the case against the Velkhari leadership. She had been working for months to document every aspect of the attack on New Busan, gathering evidence from survivors, analyzing the alien weapons used, and establishing a clear chain of command that led to the defendants. "Your Honor," she began, "the evidence will show that the attack on the primary school of New Busan was not an accident of war, but a deliberate act of terrorism designed to break the will of the human population. The defendants made a conscious decision to target children, believing that this would force humanity to surrender." The first witness was Ji-hoon, Minho's father. He took the stand with dignity, his face showing the pain of a man who had lost his son but refused to be broken by grief. In simple words, he described the morning of the attack, the joy of the festival, and the horror of seeing his child die. "Protecting his sister? My son was 8 years old," Ji-hoon testified. "He loved the Crystal Gardens, loved to play with his sister, loved to help his teacher prepare for the festival. He was just a child, but he died trying to protect someone smaller than himself." The courtroom was silent as Ji-hoon spoke. Even the alien observers seemed moved by his testimony. The weight of what the Velkhari had done was becoming clear to everyone. Present next came Dr. Sulji, who had been on New Busan during the attack. She presented medical evidence about the injuries suffered by the children, the deliberate nature of the targeting, and the advanced weapons that had been used against civilian targets. "The Velkhari used their most powerful ship-based weapons against a school building," she testified. "This was not collateral damage from a military strike. This was the deliberate murder of children." Commander Vex, who had ordered the attack, tried to defend his actions. "We were following standard procedure for dealing with resistant populations," he said. "Targeting civilian infrastructure to break morale is an accepted tactic of warfare." Prosecutor Yunji turned to face him directly. "Accepted by whom?" she asked. "Show me the military manual that says it is acceptable to murder children." "Me, the law that permits the targeting of schools." Commander Vex had no answer. Velkhari military had operated by the principle that might made right, that the strong could do whatever they wished to the weak. They had never considered that their actions might be judged by a higher standard. The trial continued for 3 months. Witness after witness took the stand to describe the attack and its aftermath. The parents of the 37 dead children testified about their loss. Survivors, including young Yuna, told their stories of that terrible day. Yuna, 6 years old and walking with advanced prosthetics, was the most powerful witness of all. She spoke in a clear, steady voice about watching her brother die, about the pain of her injuries, about the nightmares that still haunted her dreams. "Minho saved me," she said, looking directly at the defendants. "He could have saved himself, but he chose to protect me instead. That is what humans do. We protect our children." The alien observers in the courtroom began to understand something fundamental about human nature. Humans were not seeking revenge. They were seeking justice. They were not trying to dominate other species. They were trying to protect their own. When the evidence phase of the trial was complete, Judge Yemen delivered his verdict. "The defendants are guilty of all charges," he announced. "They deliberately targeted children, violated every principle of civilized warfare, and committed acts that demand the strongest possible response. The sentences were swift and final." Emperor Zeth and his top commanders were sentenced to life imprisonment. They would spend the rest of their lives in human custody, studying the history of childhood development and the importance of protecting the young. But the real punishment was reserved for the Velkhari people as a whole. Chancellor Wanho, who had been appointed to oversee the reconstruction of former Velkhari space, announced the terms of their future existence. The Velkhari species will be relocated to the world of New Sanctuary, he declared. This will be their home for the next 1,000 years. They will be supervised by human administrators. They will spend this time learning to value life, especially the lives of children. New Sanctuary was a beautiful world, with clean air, fertile soil, and everything the Velkhari needed to survive.
Ash!
But it was also a prison. The Velkhari would not be permitted to leave, would not be allowed to develop advanced technology, and would live under constant human supervision. The 4 species that had made up the Velkhari Empire were separated and placed on different continents of New Sanctuary. They would have to learn to live together as equals, rather than as conquerors and subjects. Human teachers would educate their children about the value of life, about the importance of protecting the weak, about the principles of civilization that they had forgotten. This is not revenge, Chancellor Wanho explained to the assembled alien representatives. This is education. The Velkhari will have 1,000 years to learn what it means to be civilized. When that time is complete, they will be judged again. If they have learned their lesson, they will be allowed to rejoin galactic civilization. If they have not, they will remain on New Sanctuary forever. The message was clear to every alien civilization watching the proceedings. Humanity was not interested in conquest or domination. They wanted only to protect their children and to ensure that no other species would ever again threaten the young of any civilization. The trial ended with a ceremony at the memorial built for the victims of New Busan. Yuna, now walking confidently on her prosthetic legs, placed flowers at the base of the monument that bore her brother's name. The inscription read, "Here lies the reason why harming a human child means facing extinction." Admiral Taeyun stood guard at the memorial, his uniform bearing the ribbons of the Velkhari War. He had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces, and he would spend the rest of his career making sure that no other species would ever again underestimate humanity's determination to protect their young. "The war is over," he said to the assembled crowd. "But the lesson it taught will last forever. We are a peaceful people, but we are not a weak people. We choose peace because we are strong enough to choose it. But when our children are threatened, we will respond with everything we have." The memorial service was broadcast throughout the galaxy, ensuring that every civilization would understand the new reality. Humanity had become the dominant power in known space, not through conquest or aggression, but through the simple act of protecting their young. Other alien species began to change their own societies in response to what they had witnessed. The Al-3 Collective established new laws protecting children of all species. The Nexus Federation created educational programs about the importance of non-combatant protection. Throughout the galaxy, civilizations began to understand that the safety of children was not just a human concern, but a universal responsibility. The Velkhari had learned the hard way that harming human children meant facing extinction. But the lesson was not lost on the rest of the galaxy. A new age had begun, one in which the protection of the young was paramount, and in which humanity stood as the ultimate guardian of that principle. Years later, when Yuna had grown to adulthood and become a teacher herself, she would tell her students about the day that changed everything. She would speak of her brother's sacrifice, of humanity's response, and of the lesson that had been written in the stars for all species to see. "We are not conquerors," she would say. "You're not warriors by nature.
Nice.
But we are protectors, and we will go to any lengths to keep our children safe. That is what makes us human, and that is what makes us strong." The galaxy had learned that lesson well, and it would never forget it. The age of threats to human children was over, and the age of their protection had begun.